How's it going? Thad Brown here with you on the Endgame. It is Monday, February the 2nd. Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow, which actually is a good thing because Punxsutawney Phil only gets it right about 40% of the time. So that means he saw his shadow, so it's more likely we're going to have a shorter winter. So that's a good thing. Been a minute for me for sure. Wasn't here at all last week. Had a big day on Thursday with Joe Brady getting hired, getting introduced. Monday had a family thing, so it's been, like I said, been a minute. We will talk about Joe Brady a little bit here, but more it's going to be about what he's done since he's taken over as the Bills head coach. Jim Leonhard will be a big topic of discussion. The big name hired defensive coordinator. I'll tell you what I think about that, moving from 3-4 or from 4-3 to 3-4. Talk about some of the other assistant coach hires that Joe Brady has made at this point. Staff is filling in pretty good. He's doing a good job. There isn't much left to be done. Couple important spots still left out there, but a lot of jobs have been filled, which I'll talk about in a minute why I think is a positive sign for Joe Brady. And then Brandon Beane did a whole bunch of media last week, talked about the choice to make Joe Brady the head coach. And I want to point out one thing I think that interview or those interviews might be revealing. So a lot to get to today on the show. But like I said, let's start with what Joe Brady has done so far. And I think for the most part, this is a pretty solid staff he's putting together. There's one notable hole right now in this staff, and that at this point, there is no one on this staff that's been an NFL head coach before. And generally with a first-time head coach, and by generally I mean just about every time, that coach will add someone on staff who is a former head coach, just so you got the sounding board. It makes logical sense, right? You've never done this job before. I'm sure to some degree, Joe Brady doesn't know what he doesn't know. So you want to bring a guy in who's been a head coach before, who can answer those questions. He hasn't done that yet. And both coordinator jobs are filled. Special teams coordinator job is filled. Still, you could probably maybe linebacker coach, defensive line coach. There are spots out there where you could add a position coach who has prior head coaching experience and still make this work. So the staff is not full yet, but it is kind of a surprise that we've gotten through all three coordinators and the offensive line coach, which to me, those are your four easiest jobs when it comes to finding someone with that experience. And Brady hasn't done it yet, but we'll see. Separate of that, this is a nice blend of guys who've been around the league for a while, guys who are young and have upside. And of course, I think the number one person everyone wants to talk about, and certainly the one that was the most important job, was defensive coordinator. And Joe Brady went with a pretty big name in Jim Leonhard. Now, Leonhard has never been a defensive coordinator in the NFL and has a fascinating career trajectory too, because I went back and looked. I wanted to see how often a first-year defensive coordinator has gone to a Super Bowl. Because again, everything that the Bills do this year, all the moves Joe Brady makes, it's against the background of this team is going to be expected to go to the Super Bowl this year. Those are the expectations. Even if they're not fair, and there are a lot of reasons why I think it's probably, I don't know about unreasonable, but certainly a tough ask to expect this crew to be a Super Bowl crew in 1 year. I mean, this is a guy, you see it right on your screen right now. He was a player 10 years ago. But that's what makes Jim Leonhard's career trajectory kind of fascinating, because when you go back and look, who are the guys who have been Super Bowl defensive coordinators, Super Bowl qualifying DCs in the first year of doing the job? There's a number of them who are around Jim Leonhard's age. He's 43 years old. Guys in their early to mid 40s do this quite a bit. But most of the other guys have like twice the coaching experience that Jim Leonhard has in total. And that's because when those other guys were building up 8 to 10 years as position coaches, quality control coaches, assistant to the assistant coaches, Jim Leonhard was playing in the NFL. So he was a player when other guys were building up experience that you might look at and say, well, maybe I'd rather have a more experienced coach. Well, the reason Jim Leonhard is not more experienced is because he was a player for 10 years. Does that make him better or worse? I don't know. There's a story out there about players talking about the fact that when Jim Leonard, teammates of Jim Leonard's, that this was the guy Leonard who was out there telling everybody where to line up. So it was clear that Jim Leonard had the chops to be a really good coach long before he was ever a coach of any level at all. And Jim Leonard was a position coach at Wisconsin for one season before he became defensive coordinator. So again, all those other coaches, which is 99.9% of them, that spend the first 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 years being low-level grunts, going to get coffee for the head coach, interns, like I said, quality control guys, all that stuff. Jim Leonard skipped all of that and went right to defensive coordinator at Wisconsin in year 2 of being a coach. Does that make him better or worse? I don't know. I mean, he was generating that coaching experience as a player. So this is who the Bills have picked as a first-time coordinator, a guy who's got limited coaching experience, but has been around the game about as long as everybody else, who gets the job at about the time he gets it. His defenses at Wisconsin are things that other coaches studied, even NFL coaches. He ran generally a 3-4, but it was a hybrid 3-4. He did a lot of different things with moving personnel around. He did have some 4-3 fronts. I watched a little of his defenses last night. He'll vary the fronts. He'll do some different things. But primarily, what Jim Leonard did at Wisconsin, and this is a guy that ran a very, very good D with the Badgers for 5 years, was a top 10 defense, I think, this past season, multiple years. There's enough stats out there that'll tell you this was a good defense, and it was. Joe Brady said at his press conference he wanted an attacking style defense. That's what you're going to get from Jim Leonard. And Jim Leonard has talked about his philosophy. He's not a guy that wants to go out there and make people think. He wants his guys playing fast, reacting fast, and attacking. A lot of blitzes at Wisconsin. He loves to send linebackers. And that's not too atypical for a 3-4 defense. One of the things that you like to do that defense is having a lot of different ways to bring pressure. You'll have 3 linemen, defensive linemen, but the 2 outside linebackers in the 4 part of the 3-4 will often be on the line of scrimmage. Now, sometimes they come, sometimes they drop, sometimes it's one guy who rushes, sometimes it's one guy who drops. A lot of different things you can do. Not only is it an attacking style defense, but it is a little more of a varied style of defense. 4-3 is more standard. You get 4 defensive linemen, you rush them, maybe you're bringing a blitz, maybe you're not. 3-4, there's more options. And this is what Joe Brady wanted. He wanted something that would be more aggressive, more attacking. So you're going to get that from Jim Leonard. The 2 questions I have with this, at least from the point of view of the expectations in year 1 are still the Super Bowl, is that again, this is a first-time defensive coordinator in the NFL who's being paired with a first-time head coach. Now, there are 6 defensive coordinators who've gone to a Super Bowl in their first year since 1990. So 6 of the last 35 Super Bowls have included one coordinator who were in their first year. So 6 out of 70 total. Not a high hit rate. When you go back through the list of defensive coordinators who go to Super Bowls, it is ridiculous how many of the legendary old guard guys who've been coordinators for 50 years are the ones that go to the Super Bowls. Steve Spagnuolo, Bill Belichick, Dick LeBeau. These guys have like 15 of the last 30 Super Bowls. Even Wade Phillips is in there. Fritz Schirmer has a Super Bowl in there. These are the great names. Wade Phillips, when it comes to defensive coordinating. Very rarely do you see a defensive coordinator in a Super Bowl who's kind of a no-name. Even of the 6 guys who went to the Super Bowl in year 1, Spagnuolo is one. Dan Quinn is one. So the guys who do what the Bills want Jim Leonard to do this year are generally the big names. That doesn't mean Jim Leonard can't be a big name. A lot of people think he's going to be. A lot of people think this is one of the smart defensive minds in football that the Bills have landed. And I think from that point of view, this is a really good hire for the Bills when we're talking about long-term. That you've got a defensive coordinator here who has all kinds of upside, who a lot of people like, who a lot of people think has the aptitude to be really good in this league. But he's never done this job before. And calling defenses at Wisconsin is good training, but at Wisconsin, you can catch Northwestern, Iowa, and Nebraska in 3 straight weeks. You ain't getting that in the NFL. In the NFL, you might get the Ravens, the Bengals, and Pat Mahomes in 3 straight weeks. So while I don't think the learning curve will be as steep for Jim Leonhard as it might be for Joe Brady, because at least the job Jim Leonhard is doing, he's done in other places just at a different level. But it is still a first-time defensive coordinator being paired with a first-time head coach. And while there are 6 defensive coordinators who have gone to the Super Bowl in their first year since the 80s, there's only 2 head coaches who have done that. And none of them were on the same team. So for a first-time head coach and a first-time defensive coordinator to go to a Super Bowl, it would be unprecedented in the modern NFL. Now, for sure, the easy comeback to that is, well, you know what else is unprecedented? A first-time head coach and a first-time defensive coordinator having a quarterback at Josh Allen's caliber. And that's absolutely 1,000% true. But that's still a lot of history to have to overcome. And no matter what the history says, just use your noggin. You've got a head coach that's never done this job before and a defensive coordinator who has never done this job before at this level. And we're expecting them to not only be good, but good enough to take the Bills to a championship, something that Sean McDermott, with oodles of experience, could not get accomplished. And yes, Sean McDermott may not have had the goods to get the Bills over the hump. But the idea that Jim Leonhard's going to walk in here in year 1 and do a better job on defense than what Sean McDermott has done the last few years, I think is really kind of pie in the sky. Years 2, 3, 4, 5, I could see that. You want to go back and look at history? You know what's interesting about the history of coaches who succeed? Year 2 is ridiculous with hits. I said there are 2 NFL head coaches who have been to a Super Bowl in year 1. You know how many it is for guys in year 2? 8. 8 times since the 1980s, a head coach has gone to a Super Bowl in their second year as a head coach. To me, that's almost as notable as only 2 in year 1. But I think it underlines the idea that there is some level of experience that's needed, that when you do it the first year, we talk about rookies who have to kind of drink out of a fire hose. I got to imagine being a head coach is a similar thing. And when you're adding in the defensive coordinator who's new to a degree, I think it only multiplies the amount of uncertainty the Bills will have for 2026. Again, beyond that, what Joe Brady and Jim Leonhard could be long-term when you give them a few reps doing what the Bills want them to do, I think really the sky is the limit, especially for Leonhard. I think Leonhard could be a really special defensive coordinator. But the number of people out there who are expecting Jim Leonhard to roll into Buffalo in year 1 and immediately make the Sean McDermott defense better, a defense that was number 1 against the pass last year, I think you guys are all kind of telling yourself a little story here to get yourself to the point where you are confident Jim Leonhard is going to be a better answer than Sean McDermott is. Not to mention that Jim Leonhard is going to try and run a totally different defensive scheme than what Sean McDermott does. McDermott's base defense was 4-3. Leonhard wants to go 3-4. And there were a number of the apologists out there who were trying to point out, well, no one runs different defenses anymore. It's all the same personnel. And it won't matter that Jim Leonhard's running a 3-4. If the defenses are so similar, then what are we expecting Jim Leonhard to change? You got to pick a lane here. If Jim Leonhard is going to come in here and be a better and different defensive coordinator with a different style, then it's probably going to take defensive better personnel. Because if you're going to tell me that Jim Leonhard's going to walk in to a defense that Sean McDermott has built and manicured and adjusted for 9 years, and he's going to take the same personnel and do enough with it to be notably different in year 1 without a giant scheme change, I think you're fooling yourself. If Jim Leonhard's going to come in here and do things differently, which is what the expectation is, he's going to need different personnel to do it because the current personnel has been built to fit Sean McDermott's defense. And if you're going to try and tell me that Sean McDermott didn't know what he was doing, I don't think you know what you're talking about. He wasn't good enough to get the Bills to the Super Bowl. His defenses were not good enough in the last game of the postseason. That doesn't mean the defenses weren't good. That doesn't mean that Sean McDermott wasn't getting close to the most of what you could get out of this personnel. And while I totally believe in what Jim Leonhard can do and what the long-term outlook is for his defense, it's going to take some time for him to bring in the personnel that fits what he wants to do, or to teach the current personnel how his defenses are going to work. This is not going to be an overnight thing. This is not going to be a natural one-year transition. I think Bills fans have got to be patient. And I know that there's been a thought out there, a complaint. The complaint with Sean McDermott was, well, he's wasting years of Josh Allen's prime. I don't think this is going to be a waste of a year, because I think if you believe in Joe Brady and Jim Leonard, and there's plenty of good reason to do that, even if you think that this season coming up in 2026 is not likely to be a championship season, you're not wasting it. You are using it to build towards a better, longer-term future. So I do not think that even if you agree with my assessment that a championship in year one with this combo is going to be difficult, that does not make 2026 a, quote, waste of a year. Now, is it possible that Bills, how do I want to say this? Bills fans, Bills Mafia are going to have to get comfortable with the idea that this organization might be punting on 2026 a little bit to make this work? They won't say so. Brandon Beane will tell you that we believe Joe Brady can get it done this year. Joe Brady will tell you they believe that he believes he can get it done this year championship-wise. Josh Allen, everybody believes that. That's fine. History and logic will tell you that it is a really tough ask to expect the Bills to be a championship team in year one. So yeah, to a degree, what the Bills are doing, even though they won't say it or admit it, is probably a better choice as a longer-term build. And by longer term, I mean just 2 years. Because again, the hit rate in year two with new coaches is ridiculously good. There's no reason the Bills can't be 100% expected to be a championship team in 2027. But the amount of change that they have added to this coaching staff in year one just makes it simply a logical conclusion that 2026 is going to be a difficult ask for the Bills to be a championship team. Even if I 100% believe in Jim Leonard's vision, and while I'm not as high on Joe Brady long-term, I can certainly understand how that could work out. And no matter what you think of Joe Brady, this is your traditional to a large degree. Even though it's an in-house promotion, the interesting thing with Joe Brady is that most of the time when you change head coaches, if you had a player's coach, then you bring in the disciplinarian. If you had an offensive guy, then you bring in a defensive guy. And even though the Bills have promoted from within for this hire, they still are checking those boxes of kind of going the 180 what the last guy was. Offense, defense to offense, first of all. But Sean McDermott was more of the drill sergeant type leader. Not drill sergeant in the point of view of, oh, come over here, maggot, you're the worst guy ever. Just the kind of leader who is going to stand in front of the crew and you got to stand at attention and listen to him. Joe Brady is more of a rally the troops guy. Let's all get together, fellas. We're all going to do this and we're all going to feel good about ourselves. And there's no right or wrong way to lead. It's just different. So even though the Bills have promoted from within, this is still kind of a different approach in terms of who the next head coach is going to be. All right, I want to talk real quick here about some of the other guys that Joe Brady has tabbed for his first coaching staff. And while I'm sitting here, just make sure nothing else has happened. These days, it's like check X all the time to make sure there's nobody else who got hired. Anthony Weaver, by the way, going back to the Ravens as defensive coordinator. He was the Dolphins defensive coordinator last year. So that's going back to the Ravens, but I think a different job than what he did there. Anyway, so among the other notable Bills hires, obviously, is the offensive coordinator, who is Pete Carmichael. And Pete Carmichael spent 15 years with the Saints, the first 13 of which he was offensive coordinator, but under Sean Payton. So he never called plays. Sean Payton was the de facto offensive coordinator, and Carmichael was just his number one lieutenant. Now, when Sean Payton left New Orleans, there were a couple years under Dennis Allen where Carmichael got the job to be the full-time offensive coordinator. It did not go well. He was not very well received as a play caller. He did call plays a couple times under Payton. One was when Payton, I think, went to the hospital for an issue for a few weeks. Also the year where Payton got suspended, there was some play calling for Carmichael. That also did not go well. But when Carmichael was fired by the Saints in 2023 and Sean Payton is working in Denver, you know who immediately wanted Carmichael back on his staff? Sean Payton. So to me, even if Carmichael is not bringing in some wild scheme of his own, he's not going to call plays, he's not going to do anything overly original. When you've got a mind like Sean Payton, and Sean Payton, I think, is unquestioned when it comes to his defensive genius or his offensive genius in the NFL. When you got someone of that ability and his credentials who wants to have Pete Carmichael around, then I think Pete Carmichael probably has some benefits, some things that he offers a coaching staff. So for Joe Brady to bring Carmichael in, even if you don't look at him again as a game changer, he's not going to revolutionize what Joe Brady does on offense. But what Carmichael probably will do is handle a lot of the day-to-day game planning. Essentially, he's going to handle the paperwork so Joe Brady can make the decisions. And if that guy was trusted by Sean Payton in the same job for 13 straight seasons with the Saints, and then Payton liked him so much that he brought Carmichael with him out to Denver, then I think that's a pretty good hire for Joe Brady, especially for a head coach who, like we pointed out, has plenty to learn on his new job. And he's got to do both jobs. He's still really, again, the offensive coordinator. But if you can take a chunk of that responsibility as OC and put it on to Pete Carmichael and let him, again, kind of handle the paperwork, I think that could be a big, big benefit to Joe Brady. So I do like the Pete Carmichael hire, even if, again, you're not looking at it as something that like wildly changes who the Bills are going to be. On the offense, the other really important hire is the offensive line hire, and that's Pat Meyer, who just came over from the Steelers. Now, I will say I talked to a few Steelers fans who were not bothered one bit that Pat Meyer is leaving their team. And if you go through his history in terms of what he's brought to teams, there's not a whole lot on there where you're like, wow, look at the sack numbers that year for Pat Meyer's offensive line, or wow, look how well they ran the ball that season. There's not a lot of that. Last year, the pressure rate was pretty good. In fact, now I will say Pro Football Focused had the Steelers offensive line ranked 8th in the NFL last year, which I was kind of surprised it was that high. And one of the numbers that they pointed out that was good was quarterback pressure rate, which was good. But it's Aaron Rodgers. And in the current NFL world, the quarterback has a whole lot of say in protections and how much pressure he might take simply by how fast the ball comes out, too. Aaron Rodgers is well known as a guy who, at this point in his career, gets the ball out really fast. It's drop back, read, ball out. Your pressure rate's going to look really good when the ball is leaving the quarterback's hands as fast as possible. And for the last few seasons, Aaron Rodgers has been that guy. But to be fair, PFF, for what it's worth, had the Steelers' offensive line as 8th in the NFL. And the Steelers in 23 and 24 did spend 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick on their offensive line. So they have had talent there for Meyer to use. And at least according to PFF, it paid off with a quality offensive line last year. I don't know how much I buy into that. I think PFF is I always call it, it's an educated observer. It's an educated source. It is not the end-all, be-all. And when you go back through the rest of Meyer's career, and he's been an offensive line coach, this would be about, I think, the 10th year in a row that he's coached offensive lines in the NFL. 4th different team, but 10th year in a row. Again, the numbers are generally middling. He had one nice pop year in his, I think, second season when he was with the Chargers where they ran the ball really well. For the most part, teams he's been on have not blown you away with any of the stuff, any of the counting stats that you might associate with offensive line. Obviously, with an O-line coach, there's a whole lot of things that go into it. Are guys executing their assignments, and the problem is the quarterback? Is it the running back missing holes? Are protections holding up, but the quarterback's holding the ball too long? It's hard to sit here and just be like, oh, they gave up 15 sacks, the O-line must have been good, or oh, they gave up 60 sacks, that O-line must be terrible. There's a lot more that goes into it. But there's not a whole lot on Pat Meyer's resume that makes me think this is any sort of crazy good hire. And when you consider the Bills are coming from Aaron Kromer, that's a tough level to remain at, no matter who the Bills were going to hire. The positive side of this is If the Bills can bring back Connor McGovern and David Edwards, who are both free agents, then you might kind of have an offensive line that's almost like ready-made. Like you don't really need to coach them up too much because Cromer's done all the work building it for you. You just need Meyer to come in and almost turnkey it. Just go and do what the guys did before. Almost let the guys kind of run the show on their own. But if that doesn't happen, and one or both of those guys do not come back, or if there are injuries, then obviously Meyer becomes more of a factor. So the Bills might be able to get away with a middling offensive line hire because of how good the group was already, thanks to Aaron Cromer. But if you want to just compare coach to coach, it is hard to see Meyer being anywhere in the same realm as Aaron Cromer. We'll see how he does. Again, a million factors. And sometimes it's not even about the offensive line coach not being good. It's about a lesson connecting with players. One of the things that the Bills raved about Aaron Cromer regarding was that Cromer would kind of fit what he said, how he taught to each player. And I found with a number of teachers that's what they say. You can't teach your way to everybody. You got to figure how everybody learns and kind of teach their way, teach what you want to teach in a way they'll understand. Aaron Cromer was really good at that. And while maybe Pat Meyer isn't quite Aaron Cromer level, if he can come in and connect with not even all 5 guys, if it's 4 out of 5, or if you want to talk about an entire offensive line room, 8 out of 10 guys, if he can connect with that many, then you might still get good production out of him. But just the resume so far, the resume that I've seen on Pat Meyer does not impress at all, even if it's not terrible either. But again, one of the things, it's not a hard and fast rule, but the anecdotal, what do the fans of that team think of that guy, does carry a little bit of weight. And I know Steelers fans were like, we don't need him. He's not very good at all. One more coach I want to hit on here, and this is Jay Valai from Oklahoma. He is the new corner coach for the Bills. You see it on your screen right there. He has a reputation for developing shutdown freshmen in the SEC, too. He was at Alabama for a year in 2021. That was Kool-Aid McKinstry's rookie year. He was named SEC to the SEC All-Freshman team. Moved to Oklahoma, has been at Oklahoma from 22 to 25. He was corner coach and co-defensive coordinator. So essentially passing game coordinator, more or less. The numbers at Oklahoma are pretty solid. He took a passing defense that was 60th, 70th in the nation in his first 2 years and pushed them up to like a top 30, top 35 passing defense. So certainly noticeable improvement. And then going back to Mr. Shutdown freshman, in 2024, Eli Bowen was named to the freshman All-American team. And then last year, Cortland Guillory was named to the SEC All-Freshman team. And he became the second Oklahoma true freshman ever to start week 1 at corner. So there's no doubt that Jay Valai knows how to teach 18-year-olds. Whether that translates to 28-year-olds, that'll be the question. But whether that does or not, the fact that Valai certainly has already had success taking someone who clearly has never performed at that level before because they're freshmen and he's never been in college before, and gotten them to be on all freshman teams, competent starters, good players, all America freshman teams. This is a guy that knows how to teach. And he's got a number of coaching videos out there. I was watching a couple of them today. Very good at what he does. He runs a press scheme. Like we said earlier, Joe Brady wants to attack. You're going to get that out of Jay Valai. I will say that the main concern I have with Valai's style is I do wonder how Max Hairston has a role in this defense, because Max Hairston was not a press man guy. He's a read and react speed guy. He's a close on the ball, use my wheels to take away passing lanes type of guy. And at this point, I don't think Brandon Beane's all that worried about taking previous draft picks and not getting the most out of them. This is a new direction. You got to kind of embrace what Joe Brady and Jim Leonard want to do. So if Max Hairston doesn't fit in this defense, I don't think it would prevent me from hiring Jim Leonard and or Jay Valai, even if it's not the ideal way to go about it. But if I were the Bills, I would really look into trading Max Hairston right now. He should be healthy. I don't think the injury is a factor. This was still a first-round talent. He's got ridiculous speed. I'm sure there are teams out there that would – I think the Bills could probably get a day 2 draft pick for Hairston. I really have my doubts about how he fits in this defense. And if you try to take Hairston and make him a press man corner at his size, I think you're asking for a Kyer Elam repeat. And the other part of this is, too, bringing up Kyer Elam, there are a lot of Bills fans that look at that draft and say, well, yeah, the Bills whiffed on Elam, but they hit on Christian Benford. And if you reverse the picks in terms of if you made Benford the first-round pick and Elam the sixth-round pick, nobody would care, which is 100% right. You kind of got that with the last draft, too, especially with this defense. If Dorian Strong and his neck injury is fine, everything we saw to him in college and in a brief period last year says that being a physical press man corner is something that dude can do. So if the Bills walked out of last year's draft with the exact same result as what they got in the Elam draft, nobody would care. And I think, again, assuming Strong is healthy enough to play, that there's a distinct possibility that's what happens. Because I think, while I don't think Max Hairston works very well in the Jay Valai press man scheme and or the Jim Leonard attack scheme, I think Dorian Strong could be. I think he could be really good. And if the Bills can get a day 2 pick out of Max Hairston or even a fourth rounder, that might be the best way to go, as opposed to trying to keep him around and have him, almost fight uphill when it comes to trying to fit into what the Bills want to do defensively. Because Hairston, although he can play man, he's not a bad man corner. He's just not built to be a really good press man guy. He's not going to win physically against a lot of receivers in this league, not in terms of size, strength kind of stuff. He'll win physically when it comes to speed, but not as an in-your-face kind of press man physical guy. So I wouldn't be stunned if Max Hairston ends up somewhere else before next training camp. Not usually. The Bills don't like to give up on high picks like that, especially after year one, especially after a year one where he was hurt in training camp. He didn't really get to see, he didn't have much of a chance to really do what he was going to do. But I do question his fit in this defense, even if the overall direction is fine. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Bills are going to be better because Jim Leonard and Jay Valai are going to run an attacking defense. It's different. Different can be better for different guys. Schemes are just letters on a whiteboard until you put the players in them. And I don't think Max Hairston's the right player to be put in this scheme. So it can work. I like Jim Leonard as a coordinator, and I like Jay Valai for what he brings as a defensive backs coach, as a corners coach, certainly what he's done in Oklahoma. But just because the Bills are going with an attacking scheme doesn't mean it's going to work. Just because the Bills are going with a 3-4 scheme doesn't mean it's going to work. You got to put the right players in there, which is why I think this is going to take some time before it really gets to where the Bills want it to be. All right, let's take a little break here. When we come back, I want to talk about an article that Tyler Dunn wrote today, an interview with Brandon Beane, talking about the decision to go with Joe Brady. We're not going to talk about the decision itself, but I want to talk a little bit about what I think it might mean the way Beane addressed that decision with Tyler Dunn. That's after a break. You're watching the Endgame. You're also watching Rock 1. We call it Rochester First, but the cool kids, they all refer to it as Rock 1. I'm Thad Brown. We'll be back right after a break. Thad Brown back here with you on the Endgame on a Monday. We are blue and white in the studio today because it's felt like that outside for like 2 weeks now. I know I live in Rochester, New York, but I hate winter more than someone who lives here should. And at this point, like many people, I'm ready to be done with it. I will say that I haven't gotten to the point yet where I'm scraping off the interior of my car. That has happened a few times. You leave work, when you leave work at like 12:31 in the morning, it can get all kinds of levels of cold outside. So there are times when I go outside, and not only do I have to scrape off the outside of my windshield, but I have to scrape off the inside as well. We haven't got there yet. And yeah, that might be related to how clean I keep the inside of my car. We won't discuss that on the show today at all. But in celebration of the cold, that's why we are blue and white in studio today. As always, I want to remind you that BKL Nightly is something you can find right here in Rochester First. I know it's the off season. We're still doing the show, though. It's not 4 days a week right now. Every Monday and Thursday, we will keep you updated on everything going on with the Buffalo Bills in the offseason. Today, we're going to talk about coaching hires a little more. I know I hit on them early in the show. We'll get into that a little bit as well. More deeper dive into the whole 4-3-3-4 change. So again, BKL Nightly right here in Rochester First every Monday and Thursday throughout the offseason. We'll talk coaching search, free agent analysis, draft prep, draft review, spring practice. NFL is a 12-month-a-year league, of course, whether you believe it or not, and we will be here every single step of the way. Plus, there'll be some special shows, too. When the Bills do stuff, we might do a Wednesday free agent show. We'll be on more than that, but certainly at the very least, Monday and Thursday, including tonight. The other, well, I mean, not the other one, but Brandon Beane apparently did a number of interviews with various beat writers and feature writers recently to talk about the decision to go with Joe Brady. Tyler Dunn with Go Long was one of them. And Tyler Dunn does a lot of deep dives into Bill stuff. We've been very, very anti-Sean McDermott. A lot of quotes and anonymous sources that have talked about why McDermott may have been the problem. Certainly why he was, things that I guess helped to color why the Bills potentially may have let go of McDermott. But today's article was primarily about Brandon Beane and moving forward. And there are a number of interesting notes in there. There was something about Phillip Rivers and the interview with him and how that transpired and how he was emotional. And Brandon Beane told some of us on the side after the Joe Brady press conference on Thursday about this interview. Beane was blown away by Phillip Rivers, called him a football savant. And Tyler Dunn referred to this, and Beane told us this too, about how emotional Rivers was when he called Beane back to say, hey, I can't take the job, just not right for my family right now. I don't think that Rivers would have been a legitimate finalist for the job. I will say that he would have been closer to getting the job than you and me and Brandon Beane would have thought before he interviewed in the first place. But the thing that really stuck out to me was how Brandon Beane described the decision to go with Joe Brady relative to the very less than supportive response from Bills Mafia. In the article, Tyler Dunn said that there was a local Buffalo media outlet that did a poll on the Joe Brady promotion favorability, and the number was at like 8% favorable. So Beane's response, not necessarily that poll in specific, but the general lack of interest, lack of support for the Joe Brady hire, at least at first, is this quote: bleep the outside. Now, I'm saying bleep. That's not what either the article said or what Brandon Beane said, but this is a PG show. So bleep the outside, Brandon Beane says. I'll take my bleeping job and bleeping go home if this doesn't work. Now, what Brandon Beane is saying is that, without getting into the bleeping part, this is my call. This is the guy I like. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to get fired, and I'm cool with that. And Brandon Beane, I've talked to him a number of times. He's always well aware at the lack of job security when it comes to being an NFL general manager. Even when the Bills 3-4 years ago, when everything was riding high with Josh Allen and the Bills hadn't gone through all these playoff failures, even then, when I would talk to Brandon Beane, he would freely bring up, well, maybe I won't be here. You never know. He understands what it's like to be a GM in the NFL in terms of the fact that he could be gone at a moment's notice. Sean McDermott is proof of that. So when Brandon Beane says, I'll take my bleeping job and bleeping go home, he's referring to the understanding of how little job security he may have. And obviously that has ratcheted up more because there will be no third coach for Brandon Beane. If Joe Brady doesn't work, he's right, Brandon Beane will go too. The reason this stands out to me is just the use of the F-bombs. Now, look, this doesn't mean that Brandon Beane needs to talk like he's in third grade Catholic school when he's doing an interview with anybody. But Brandon Beane is a personable guy. Brandon Beane is not a guy that in general has been prone to emotional outbursts. He's passionate. And I think that's certainly a part of this too. But over the last couple years, we've seen Brandon Beane go from the consummate media personality. Does he sometimes maybe say a little more than he needs to? Sure. He's been very open. And in general, that's appreciated. Even if there are a couple missteps that maybe some national outlets might have a problem with. But in the last couple years, that has ratcheted up to emotional outbursts, for lack of a better term. There was the rant against the article that ESPN put out ranking Josh as or with unnamed sources saying Josh Allen was the most overrated quarterback in the NFL. Brandon Beane had a big problem with that. And then obviously there was the wide receiver rant with the Buffalo radio station in April of last year. And then there's this. I get Brandon Beane wanting to defend his decision, to say, I don't care what anyone else thinks. This is who I think the Bills should have. And the article kind of pats Beane on the back for making that call. I don't know if we need to do that. I don't think Brandon Beane should have done anything other than choose the guy who he thought was best suited for the job. But for Brandon Beane to really be that upset with a response that, as Beane said, was a surprise to no one. The idea that the Bills fan base, at least at first, was going to have a problem with the Bills promoting Joe Brady from within shouldn't surprise anybody. Brandon Beane, most of all. So for Beane to really come back and say, bleep the outside, I'll take my bleeping job and bleeping go home, he doesn't need to do that. He knows, as I said, no one understands the deal better than Brandon Beane. He knows that this is a job that you're not long for if you start to make mistakes. He knows that this is a job that if he doesn't get this coaching hire correct, is going to result with him being unemployed. This is a fact of life. This doesn't require multiple F-bombs. To me, this is a reflection of what's going on at One Bills Drive and what has been going on the last few years. The more the Bills miss the playoffs or miss the Super Bowl, the more the pressure ratchets up to finally figure out a way to get there. And if you're Brandon Beane, who's been at this for 8 or 9 years, who is good at his job, who has got to be as frustrated as anybody, more so than anybody, about not getting there, I think you can understand a feeling, or I think you can understand the fact that the pressure has now reached a point where there will be passionate, to put it generously, outbursts about his quarterback, his team, choices he makes. And I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's right or wrong or that it's any sort of problem. I think, as I said, Beane feels passionate about the choice he made. He should. There is pressure being felt to get to a Super Bowl. There should be. And I think if Beane and everybody in that front office is getting to the point where they feel squeezed about trying to figure this out, I think that's just the natural human tendency. But I think that's why we're seeing this. Because again, Beane doesn't have to react in a sit-down article days after he makes the decision. And at this point, I'm assuming this is after the reaction softened, because I think the fan base is, especially after the Joe Brady press conference, much more amenable to the idea of Joe Brady being the one who figures this out. I don't see why Brandon Beane gets this level of passion, if you want to be generous again, dropping multiple F-bombs about bleep the outside, I'll take my bleeping job and bleeping go home. Brandon Beane knows the score. He knows this is his shot. This is going to be the last one. I don't see why you're getting angry about that. This is how the league works. Brandon Beane's not going to be destitute and unemployed even if he loses the Bills job. I'm sure there'll be 15 organizations that'll want to line up and bring Brandon Beane on board as assistant GM, pro personnel, scout, whatever you want to say. There'll be jobs for Brandon Beane. His family's not going hungry. Even if it doesn't work out with the Bills, this guy's done a good job here. I just find it surprising. I shouldn't say surprising. I find it notable that when Brandon Beane talks about this decision and how the fans react, it's this level of defiance, is this level of vehemence, that he is not afraid to say things like an angry fan, someone who's mad at their boss, I'll take my bleeping job and bleeping go home. I think that's a sign of just how much pressure there is at One Bills Drive right now, especially for the people like Beane who have been in their job or have been in, had their responsibilities all the way through the duration of this run. Doesn't mean the Bills can't get there with these guys. Sometimes pressure kicks you in the ass to do the right thing. And sometimes it squeezes you into uncomfortable decisions. Again, I think it's almost a natural thing that Bean is reacting this way. It should. It should be something that causes nerves. It should be something that has this organization bothered in terms of what they've accomplished so far. Because although they've done a lot, there still are big steps that have to be traveled. And Brandon Bean hasn't gotten there yet. All right, every week on a Monday when I'm here, we usually bring Rachel Liebert in to talk about things that stood out to us over the weekend. We call it, you see this? So Rachel is joining us right now. Rachel, you have to adjust your camera there. Yeah, I'll put your microphone up in a minute here. Microphone's up. There you go.
There we go.
All right, you're good.
There we go.
Very nice. Put you in the middle.
It's been a minute since I've done You See This.
Yeah. Well, it's been a minute since I've done anything on the Endgame.
That's
because,
true.
I mean, last week, like I said, for those of you just tuning in now, Thursday was Joe Brady press conference day. Monday was a family thing for me. So we have not done a show in over a week and a half. We haven't done You See This in a couple weeks. Yeah. So, but we're back now.
We're back.
And we're not going anywhere. I'm going to go first today. So the thing that kind of stuck out to me was the firing of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. That is the Vikings' former general manager. Now, look, the timing of this was a surprise. It happened last week, which was basically 3 weeks after the season ended. This could have been done a heck of a lot closer to the end of the season, whatever. There isn't much argument for keeping him around. He didn't do a good job. Draft picks weren't very good. Obviously, the main thing he did was get rid of Sam Darnold in favor of J.J. McCarthy. And then J.J. McCarthy wasn't good, and Sam Darnold is going to that Super Bowl thing. So right. Those are things that are going to get you fired, right? Here's the thing. One of the different reports that went along with this, and I'm sure some people out there saw it as well, was that when his first child, I'm assuming, was born, and I think this was during a training camp. I think it was during a 23 training camp. He took 2 weeks of paternity leave to be home. Now, he still worked from home, did Zooms, did all the stuff you'd work from home for. But according to, I think it was a Diana Rossini article, there were a number of executives around the league who were stunned that someone would take 2 weeks off during training camp to be home with your kid. And it sparked the whole thing about, should you be able to do that? And there's a number of people that are saying, it's a child, it's your family, that comes first, always do that. And then the other side's like, well, look, this is football, and he's not taking, you can't have like a quarterback take Sunday off for to be with a kid. You can, but people don't want you to. So there's levels of it. Here's where I land. Number one, if you're judging someone else's family dynamic, that's a you problem. If Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah feels like it is a priority for him to be home with his family, then that's his call. By the same token, ironically, Joe Brady in his press conference pointed out how he missed the birth of his child recently because he was doing his offensive coordinator thing with the Bills and used it as a point of pride of, look at me, I will sacrifice for the team, even if it means not being home with my family. You know what? If his wife is cool with that, I have no place to say otherwise. That is a Joe Brady family discussion in the same way it's a Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah discussion. And if you're out there saying, that's wrong, that's right, that's a you problem. The one caveat to that is, if you're Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and you're taking 2 weeks off, but then you're telling your scouts who had a kid who maybe is on the road watching Oklahoma, Texas on Saturday, well, you still have to go to that assignment. I don't care that you had a child recently. That I have a problem with.
Was that the case?
I don't know. No, I'm saying a theory. There's nothing that I haven't seen anything out there reported that happened. The only question was, again, I think it was just referred to as other executives in the league thought it was weird. But just in general, though, because I'm not really commenting on the situation. The point I'm making is that if his family decision is to be home, then that's his family decision. But I will say you got to keep everything consistent. So if he's going to, just to finish the point, if he's going to take 2 weeks off, then everybody else should be able to take 2 weeks off too. And you got to run your organization that way.
I agree. And I think too, I feel like people are acting like this is like the head coach took off the 2 weeks. Not that the GM isn't important during training camp, of course, but it's not like he's the head coach who's calling the shots during training camp, first off. Second off, I feel like if there's any part of the season, which like besides the off season, that you would want your GM to take 2 weeks off, I feel like training camp might be the window that you would say would be the better.
Probably,
I mean,
yeah.
not during the season. You don't want to do it during the draft. Like, I mean, building up
Yes.
to the draft for sure.
Yeah,
so
you can't take the 2 weeks off leading up to the draft.
Exactly. So
Right,
I feel like if there's any case where this would be okay, I feel like training camp might be the best. And also, just like you said, we don't know his family dynamic. We don't know what his wife maybe was going through that he felt like he needed to take these 2 weeks off. So that part of it, I feel like, I don't know. It feels kind of funny. It's the same thing you said. For people to be like in someone's family business, it feels kind of weird. I don't know. And I think too, like, we just forget sometimes, yes, this is football. Yes, it's happening all year round. But like you said, this is someone's family too, and you don't know their situation. So I'm completely with you. I don't know why this is such a big controversy, unless you, like you said, he's telling other people they can't do it, but we don't know if that's the case.
And I know I get under executives thinking, I don't know how you could possibly do this because I have to do X, Y, Z during training camp. That's fine. Mm-hmm. He might be a better worker than you. Now, he got fired. He's clearly not. But judging someone on how do you take that time off? Well, look, if they can figure it out, go ahead.
And it didn't seem like they had the team had any issues with it. I mean, they let him do it.
At the time, yeah. The way it was reported, if you want to read between the lines, it sounds like the team said it was okay, but privately there might have been some grumbling. So again, this goes back to, I don't know that the rules were the same for everybody. I haven't seen anything that says that they weren't, but there does seem to be an undercurrent of maybe the Vikings weren't super happy about this, but getting mad about it, to me, that's his
There's
call.
Bigger things to be mad about. And look, like the fact that you don't have Sam Darnold. And
well, exactly right, and that you can fire the guy for. But if he does this and then can't do his job, well, then he gets fired. He couldn't do his job. But if he does this and can do his job, then who cares?
Then he's a
who
good
cares?
worker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you got, Rach?
Not a few weeks ago, a few months ago at this point, we talked about a Syracuse radio show moment, and there's another one because things are going down.
They do good radio out there in Syracuse, don't they?
I guess some bad radio, though, it seems. A caller on Thursday night called into the Adrian Autry radio show, so the head coach's radio show, and asked him his name. He identified himself as Tyler from Binghamton, was what he said. And he said, I was just wondering, who do you think are going to be the best candidates for your job once you, and then they cut it off. Like they cut off the caller because clearly it seems like he was going to say once you get fired, once you whatever. We all know Syracuse is not doing as hot as everybody thought they were going to be. They're not doing well in the ACC. They're like 13-9 overall, but they're just not doing great. I think a lot of the hype was obviously Kai and Anthony was coming in, and Carmelo Anthony, and just this whole, he's going to be a generational talent like his dad. He's going to change his whole program. That hasn't happened, but I think it's just this dynamic of what is happening in Syracuse with their athletics, because their football season was atrocious. Now this basketball season, it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, and fans aren't afraid to say it. I mean, before it was one of the football players' family members that said it. Now it's a fan saying it. It's just one of those moments where it's like you're kind of watching an athletic department, at least in the eyes of like the two most profitable programs, just kind of crumble. And that's what it feels like is kind of going on. I don't know if you saw the clip and what your reactions to it were, but that's kind of what I took away.
I've not seen the clip, but I'm totally with you on where Syracuse is. And I wondered if this might happen when Jim Boeheim left, because Boeheim had built such a great program there that it felt impervious to having any sort of issues. Mm-hmm. But when you step back and look at Syracuse, this is not a school in a part of the world where people want to go. This is not a school in a part of the world that creates a lot of high-level athletes, a good amount, more than you might expect.
Yeah.
But
it's been a while.
It's not exactly like we're rolling out blue chip football or basketball players out of Syracuse, Rochester, Utica, Binghamton, upstate New York. Those factors all make it pretty hard to recruit to Syracuse if you don't also have the head coach that's like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Mm-hmm. So, to me, what Syracuse is now facing is reality. And
exactly. Yeah.
the football program has been there for decades, and you've seen what happened. They've had moments. And although, like, I think saying the football program is crumbling, I think is early, because Fran Brown's had one good year and one bad year. Yeah. So we'll see. Mm-hmm. It might be crumbling. You might be right. But either way, Syracuse is facing what every other Division I program in the country has to deal with, which is trying to figure out how to make it work with the hand you got dealt. When you're Bama in football, or North Carolina in basketball, or Kansas in basketball, you've got that natural reputation. You also have the coaches that are still making that program work. If you're Syracuse and you don't have the coaches that are making that program work, you're not going to be the same. What is Indiana basketball right now? It really is not. It's still good. Big Ten's a little better conference.
It's not
but
great.
Exactly. So UCLA basketball, these are programs that 30 years ago were the absolute blue bloods that are, they're okay. This is what Syracuse is now. And they're going to have to figure out. It also doesn't help that we're in the era of NIL and transferring
Exactly,
where you can't build a program.
Well, did you see, also going off of Syracuse, did you see, the rapper Tuesday, did you see all that stuff with him, how he committed to football, Syracuse football? He's like 25 years old. Well, like a few months ago, he said he was going back to college and going to play for Syracuse. And then I almost did this as my did you see, but he, like 2 days ago, said he's not going to Syracuse anymore. And then Fran Brown made a statement and said he was a walk-on and it wasn't going to happen. And then this rapper who's like trying to play football came on and said, I never said that. So there's like more drama associated with that. It's like funny because it's like this 25-year-old rapper was going to play at Syracuse, but it's just also that kind of adds to the whole of like, what is the state of Syracuse athletics? Because if that's happening here and then this basketball situation is happening, it's just like a buildup of what, like, where do they go to fix what's going on?
That they've got to do what everybody else has to do, which is try and figure out how to come up with good players and and pay a bunch of money
and convince people to move to Syracuse, New York.
Speaking of like older people come back to college, you see the NBA player that wants to play in college? I almost did that.
It just keeps happening. Like I've seen a few of like, or these G League, they played like a few minutes in G League and now they're playing.
I'll say this, and we only got 30 seconds. We're not gonna be able to talk about this enough, but if I go to law school or if I get a job as a consultant and then want to go back to school and get a degree, I can do that. I don't have any problem with this guy doing it. If you want to go back to college and you have eligibility left,
I just don't understand, I guess, like eligibility is so like I don't know where like the lines are for eligibility. Like that's where I stand, but I don't know enough about like the actual rules of eligibility to like really know.
I mean, generally it's 4 years. So if you have one of those left, I'm fine. Now, if you've spent 4 years and you want to come back, I have a problem with that.
But like to have like pro minutes and then come back to college feels
so what?
Yeah.
I mean, like if I can go back and get a degree as an older person, I don't see why someone can't go back and play if they still have the eligibility. Like my point is having pro minutes should not disqualify you anymore by itself.
But like you already made the decision to be pro, so now you're just going back on it?
Yeah, why not? Why not? Like what's the harm?
Yeah, who's a
kid wants to get a college degree, right? I mean, allegedly. We'll see. All right. Thanks to Rachel for being in. I'm Thad Brown. We will see you again on Thursday with more of the Endgame. Catch you later.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.